Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, can at times contain adult language and themes. It is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Digital Dissection podcast, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties, creators, and topics. We are your humble hosts, Joe and Mark, two pop culture nerds dedicated to telling entertainment history before it's forgotten too soon. Join us on Facebook, Twitter, and our blog for more information on the show. We also love to hear from you, so why not write us at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. And now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to dissecting.
Welcome back, pop culture nerds, to Digital Dissection. We get to speak with some wonderful humans on this program, but today's guest is noticeably recognized for her ability to portray a non-human. She's the voice of GLaDOS from the immensely popular Portal series, and she's coming off of universal acclaim for her role in Night Mother. We welcome Ellen Mclain. How are we doing, Ellen?
Well, I'm doing very well. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Joe. I'm very pleased to be here speaking with you too.
Yes, it is wonderful to have you. I appreciate you being able to carve some time out for us. I know we've been chasing you for a little bit. So it's really great to hear from you and get to hear a little bit more. So, but really quick, we like to start our conversations, Ellen, a little bit earlier in the lives of our guests. And this is because we like to understand a little bit of what maybe the A&E biography might cover, right? We're gonna go back a little ways before we get into some of the roles you might have played here. But here's something I was curious about, Ellen, from day one when we were reaching out and trying to connect with you. The internet seems to not know a whole lot about Ellen Mclain, before she came to Seattle. Some of the before days here, and we're trying to understand a little bit about, when you were a kid coming up and trying to understand a little more about Ellen Mclain then, where we grew up and, what we were kind of focusing on in our young days.
Well, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. That's where I grew up. But I did go away to school pretty early on. I went to the North Carolina School of the Arts when I was 15 to study music and in particular singing. And of course, that's my earliest. I've just always wanted to be a singer, always wanted to sing. So it's from singing that I got into acting and, acting in shows, in musicals. And then it's because of my husband, John Patrick Lowry, that I got a voice demo in 2002. Because I had just been doing music theater and opera, and that was plenty. And John had been doing computer game work already, voices for computer games. And he said, "Oh, Ellen, just get a demo." So I did. But the early days, Mark and Joe, singing. And I was one of those little kids who took years and years of piano lessons. And I'm a terrible piano player, but it did help my musicianship so that I was always able to teach myself my own music. I could always play it on the piano. And
Sure.
and I still do that. And of course, I teach voice all the time. I've been teaching voice for over 30 years. Not over 30 years. Let's see, 87, 97, 07. Yeah, like 35 years I've been teaching voice. And now, since the pandemic, I've been teaching voice on Zoom calls, which is surprisingly effective. I've really sort of, got it worked out so that I am a help to my students, even through Zoom.
That's saying
Yeah.
something. See, with sort of distortion may happen because someone has a bad Wi-Fi connection. Like how that could make this whole process difficult, having to teach voice over the internet.
Well, there is a time lag, and
Hmm.
how I deal with that is I I can't play for the student. When students would come to our condo, I would always do the playing. And over Zoom, you can't do that. So my voice students have had to become independent on their own pianos or keyboards, and they play all their own
Hmm.
vocalises, and they play their song material. And with most, well, actually, all of my young voice students, well, all of them, we all work on Italian repertoire. They have to sing in Italian, so they have to be able to play their, at least the melody of their songs. And the Wi-Fi connection has been good enough. But I'll tell you,
Hmm.
I have one student who's studying with me now from Minneapolis, and she studied with me 20 years ago when I taught at an arts college here in Seattle. And so she's a returning student, but she's in Minneapolis now, and the time lag is longer. It really does. It takes
Oh.
longer to go up to the satellite and come all, from Minneapolis and then come all the way back down to Seattle. And, I've got a lesson with her tomorrow, and you get used to it.
Yeah.
It's like I
All
will
right.
play a chord and wait, and she'll hear the chord, and then she'll sing something. So
Hmm.
it's not instantaneous, but you just get used to it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, well, taking things back just a bit here, you had mentioned that like you'd grown up in Nashville, but then ended up going to North Carolina at the age of 15. Was this like a family decision to move, or was there some sort of moment of rebellion and your parents were like, no, young lady, you're going to North Carolina boarding school for
No, I
music,
think it's
and you
mainly
will
that
come
my
back when you're
parents
ready?
kicked me out. No, really, because the North Carolina school, it's now called the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, but it's
Hmm.
also high school. And my mother had found out about a summer program through another mother, another mother. And my
Hmm.
sister Rebecca uh, became a professional dancer, but she was a dancer, I was a singer. We went over to the school and auditioned and did a summer program. Well, my sister was so good at dance that they wanted her to stay for the regular school session. So she
mm,
stayed for her junior year in high school. Well,
Hmm.
I wanted to do everything that Becky did. So I went back to Nashville and, did my sophomore year at Hillsborough High School in Nashville, public high school. But I was working toward another audition because I wanted to go to the School of the Arts in the regular school year as well, because Becky was doing it. So my parents actually didn't kick us out. We wanted to go to this art school, and my
Hmm.
sister got in first, and then I had to do it too.
Ah, yes. Know the feeling as a younger sibling, the need to chase and do things similar to the older one.
Oh
That's
yes.
definitely alive and well.
Yes.
Hmm. But this wouldn't be the only time you would study away because didn't you go to college in Boston for
Well,
performing arts as
yes,
well?
I stayed at the School of the Arts for 4 years. So 2 years high school,
Hmm.
2 years college. And then my best friend, Albert Williams, God rest his soul, he was an organist and a harpsichord player. And he was going to go to New England Conservatory to study with Mireille Lagacé, who was a very famous organ teacher. And he said, "Oh, Ellen, you should audition for New England." So I made a tape. I didn't apply anyplace else. I just made a tape because Albert was going, and they accepted me. And I got the most wonderful voice teacher named Barbara Wallace, who is alive and well and living in Vermont. And she's in her 90s. Wonderful voice teacher. And Albert and I got an apartment in Boston and lived together for the first year. We got other roommates later on, but Albert was my entree to the New England Conservatory, and a great friend, really a great friend, Albert.
Now, if I remember correctly, didn't one of your teachers also kind of help you pay tuition while you were there, or kind of cover your stay at the conservatory?
I won scholarships at New England, and she was a trustee, Mrs. H.S. Payson Rowe, very old Boston family. And she was a trustee at New England Conservatory, and she gave a vocal scholarship every year. And I received that. It was a full scholarship, and I received that scholarship my last year in undergraduate. And then I knew if I stayed and got my master's degree that Mrs. Rowe would pay for it. So I stayed at New England and got my master's degree in music, primarily in voice. And it was opera. I was studying opera. That's what I was working on. But the other thing, my voice teacher, Barbara Wallace, got me a church job. So she sang with King's Chapel Choir, which was a very famous choir. But one of the young musicians that she knew was a man named David Carney, who started a choir at St. Anthony's Shrine, which was a Catholic church downtown. And Mrs. Wallace had me audition for him. And so I had that church job for 4 years while I was in Boston. And, I swear by church jobs because it's been part of my income ever since I was in college. I've always had a church job. And when John and I moved here in 1989, I got a church job. And I was at an St. Paul's Episcopal Church. And then I got a job at a Catholic church. And then I got a job at a Presbyterian church. And the Presbyterians paid me to sing for them up until the pandemic. And then when the pandemic started, I said, no, you guys aren't paying me anymore. I'm so old, don't pay me. But I still sing for the Presbyterians.
Yeah.
So I'm ecumenical.
Well, hey, there's nothing wrong with being employed. Like that's great to have consistent work.
Well, I think for performers, I always call it cobbling together living. And when we first moved here, I worked for a singing telegram company, and John and I worked for a company called the Dickens Carolers, and we sang Christmas carols. And I did lecture demonstrations for the Seattle Opera Guild. I would put together hour-long programs of operatic excerpts, and I would lecture about opera, and weddings and funerals, and you just sort of do, besides the shows,
Sure.
Besides getting cast in a show, you did all sorts of things and teach voice, teach private voice. And then I worked at Cornish College of the Arts for a while. And I also taught for Village Theater's Kids Stage, which is an after school program. I worked for them for 10 years. So, John was right to say, Ellen, get a voice demo, because it was just another opportunity to make a living.
This is funny you mentioned this, because we spoke to a voice actor, Gavin Hammond, a few weeks ago, and a few months before, or actually last year, we also talked to a voice actor for anime, Kylie Bear. And it seems like everybody kind of pushes someone towards voice acting. there's always like a conversation that happens, and there's a point that goes, you know what? Have you ever thought about doing this? And so it's just funny to kind of hear that parallel to other journeys that we've heard. And to shift gears for a moment, though, kind of going away from work for a second and kind of going to hobbies, because as you can tell, Joe and I are career nerds over here. But online sleuths have kind of pointed towards things a couple times, and I just want to verify this. And that's on the topic of photography, because people have mentioned online that you have an interest in it. And we wanted to find out if that was the truth, because we can't really find any photos. We weren't sure if it was real or not.
Well, actually, I will tell you that the photographer is John. John is the photographer, and he was, before cell phones. I take a lot of pictures now, but just for my own enjoyment, because it's so easy to do it on the cell phone. It's just so easy. But, John was the one who had, all the lenses and the film canisters, and we have lots and lots of slides. We could have a slideshow that lasted about 10 years, could put everyone to sleep. Because the thing that we have always done since we moved out here is we were backpackers. And that's one of the reasons that we moved to Seattle, because the hiking is so good around here. And of course, this was all instigated by John, but I was there too with my rucksack on my back. No, really, my REI backpack and our, backpacker tent and our sleeping bags and, our little stove and serious backpacking, like, 10-day trips, that kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
So but even with that, John would have the camera with him and take pictures. But now I take a lot of pictures and just, share them with John and share them with our close friends. So I'm not very good. It's just because I have a cell phone. It's easy.
Well, you know what? Honestly, I would trust that you know what you're doing if I saw these photos. Okay, no judgment at all. But
I take a lot of flowers. I like flowers.
yeah, why not? I mean, some people like to do a lot of these like photos of animals and stuff like that. But I mean, I imagine a flower is an easier subject to work with.
Well, I took a picture of a ladybug. I was out on a walk yesterday at Discovery Park, and Discovery Park is full of Queen Anne's lace, and I saw a beautiful Queen Anne's lace, and there was a ladybug right in the middle of it. So I got really close and took a picture of the ladybug.
Very nice. Well, just make sure if you do post that photo to give credit to the ladybug and cite it properly, because you don't want them coming after you.
No.
Well, shifting gears for a moment. Now, looking at some of your performance background. Now, you've actually had some time on Broadway. Is that correct?
Yes, I did 2 Broadway shows. And I auditioned for a lot more than that. But when you're in New York, that's always the dream. You wanna do a show on Broadway. And this is an interesting story, and I credit my dear friend Mary Stout. And Mary Stout and I met in a church job. So I had graduated, with my master's from New England, and I had gone back to Nashville. And I was, living at home for a while, and I got a church job, St. George's Episcopal Church. And another soprano there was Mary Stout. And the wonderful thing about that church job is that Mary and I bonded, and we talk all the time. We're still friends. And Mary's done a lot of Broadway shows. But Mary and I were real know-it-alls, and we both got fired from that job. because we thought we knew better than the music director. Now, a lot of people who know me will think, oh yeah, that's Ellen. Yeah. But so we got fired from St. George's, but we remained great friends. And in 1979, we moved to New York City together. Well, Mary already had her Actors Equity card, which means that she was a member of the union, and she had joined through a theater in Florida, and I can't remember the name of the theater, but that's how she joined Equity. So we were in New York. We had 4 different sublet apartments that first year. 4 different sublets. This is the thing. Actors go out of town and they always want people to sublet their apartment. So we'd sublet one, and then they'd come back and would have to move to another sublet, and then they'd come back, would have to move to another sublet, then they'd come back, etc. But anyway, so Mary was already in the union, and Mary had done an audition for a production of My Fair Lady, which was going to star Rex Harrison, who had, done the original production with Julie Andrews, and then had been in the movie and won the Oscar for Best Actor for My Fair Lady for playing Professor Henry Higgins. So anyway, Mary had gotten a call back for this Broadway production, and she said, Ellen, you should go. Well, I wasn't in the union, and the rule was, and still is, that if this was a union audition, you couldn't audition for it. You didn't have your union card. And Mary said, I said, Mary, I can't do it. And she said, no, do it anyway. Come with me. So I went down to this, studio downtown New York, and Mary said, give your picture and resume to the stage manager of the auditions. And I did. And it just so happened that there was a man in the audition who was one of Alan Lerner's assistants, Stone Whitney, a New York director. And I had just auditioned for another show, Stone Whitney, the week before, and he remembered me. And he said, yep, this kid is good. You should see her. Well, they had me come into the room and, sing 8 bars of music. And I did my 8 bars of music, and they said, yes, Ellen, stay. I stayed for the callback, and I got asked. And all because of my friend Stout, of course, didn't get cast, but she is such a wonderful person. She was so happy for me. That's how I got my Actors Equity card, because I got cast in this national tour, which was then going to go to Broadway, of Fair Lady, and I was a chorus. And all because of my friend Mary Stout, who's still my friend, she's doing a production of Steel Magnolias at a theater in Fort Worth in Texas. Still working. We're still working. But that was a wonderful thing that friend Mary did. So that was my first Broadway show. And then the Broadway show lasted 2 weeks, and it was with Peggy Lee. And Peggy Lee is famous for the song Fever. Give me fever, fever in the morning, fever, you know, however that song goes. And I was the understudy for the female backup singers. So I had to know their parts. But it was another Broadway show at the Lunt Fontanne, and it lasted 2 weeks and closed. And I have interesting stories from that experience. So, you guys ask interesting questions. I've never told those stories in an interview.
We kind of pride ourselves on that, honestly, because we do like to dig deep. We want to ask you about the stuff that hopefully you either haven't answered in a long time or have never answered. So we appreciate
Nobody never talked about that. I have stories about Rex Harrison too. Very interesting person. God rest his soul.
Is any of it under NDA, or are you able to talk about that now?
Well, it's Rex Harrison at the time, when he did the original production of My Fair Lady, that was in 57, I think. 57 or 58, something like that. And he had never sung. And they just decided that he was a good choice for Henry Higgins. And of course, he was fabulous. And he was a wonderful, wonderful actor, really a wonderful actor. But he was doing this show in 80 and 81 with a whole bunch of youngsters, one of them me. And I remember when we were in LA, he took he took everybody for dinner. He was very gracious. And we went out to a very fancy restaurant, Mr. Harrison, and a bunch of chorus kids. And it wasn't me, but one of the chorus boys set the table on fire. and everybody is fanning flames. And, it was because of a can, and but just because we were, greenhorns. And poor Mr. Harrison is dealing with all of these children, and he was 74 at the time. And I know how he felt, because I'm 69 now. It's like, yeah, if I went out for dinner with a bunch of kids and one of them stayed on fire, I'd be a little nonplussed. but wonderful story.
Very
wonderful story.
Well,
but tell you what, to kind of piggyback off of performance for a moment here, it'll actually lead us to our first one of our first fan questions that we have for you.
So one of our fans want to know, do you have a preference between singing styles, and are there styles that you haven't tried but want to experiment with?
I've sung pretty much every kind of music. I've had to. Of course, the one that I've studied the most and feel the most confident with is opera, and then music theater. But I've sung country and I've sung rock. I've sung folk music. John and I think you know this. We were just in Sweden, and at a convention, NERCON, which is the biggest Scandinavian gamer convention, and I had to learn a song in Swedish, Guldet blev till sant, which was actually written by Bjorn and Benny, the two guys in ABBA. They've written a lot of music other than ABBA. And I had to learn that song for the opening ceremonies, which was lots of fun. And I mean, it's really, music theater style, but it was in Swedish. This is the first time I've sung Swedish. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I would say music theater in Swedish was not a place that our fans thought you would go. So that's pretty cool.
Very nice. Well, kind of rounding out the some of the pre voice acting work, and I say that kind of loosely because technically this does kind of fold into voice acting a little bit. Is actually your time as a radio DJ alongside John, and
Yeah.
so I wanted to ask you about that because not because this is a radio show necessarily, but it's more to understand some of that foundation and what kind of happened inside the booth. Like can you just kind of walk us through a little bit of your time as a DJ?
Well, it's because John was working on his doctorate in music at Indiana University in Bloomington. And we both auditioned at WFIU, which is the NPR affiliate in Bloomington. And this was a classical radio station then. I'm not sure, like we also worked at KUOW here in Seattle, but that was after we left Indiana. And KUOW was a classical station, but now it's news and information. But at WFIU we were spinning records. We were putting the LPs on the turntable and setting it down, and back timing the recordings, and because everything has to time it on radio, because what you don't want is dead air. Dead air not happen. And while we were there, you're alone in the studio spinning records. CDs were just coming in. So we had a few of those, and CDs were great because CDs had every track timed. So it made it very easy to figure out, when the track was going to be over. You had to front announce and back announce and read the weather, read the news. John worked on election night, and he did election coverage, reading the returns from the polls. It was a great job. It was a great job to have as I was a student spouse. And we lived in married student housing. Hepburn, lived in Hepburn, C117. And it looked like a no-tell motel, is what it looked like. And it was 2 rooms, cinder block, and hot as hell. And you walked into the living room, and then between the living room and the bedroom, there was like a little counter kitchen, and then the bathroom, and then you had the bedroom. And it was hot as hell. And that's where we lived for 2 years. And I would take a bicycle and I would ride over to the radio station. And the person I liked working with, and I'm blocking his name, it's horrible, but he was the longtime opera director at Indiana University. And he had a program where he would talk about a particular opera and play excerpts, but he always had one of the young announcers spin the records for him because he didn't want to bother with that. So that was the only time I'd actually be in the studio with somebody, and he was so wonderful. And we had jokes at the radio station. And of course, we had a phone line to the outside, and people would call us. If we would play something that they liked, they'd call us up. We had regular callers who would call while we were playing something. And I remember one time I was playing a piece of music by Carl Maria Ditters von Dittersdorf. And he was a classical composer, very forgettable. And I remember that I did an announcement. You'd pick some pieces because they were the right length. And if I was coming up to an hour or a half hour break where I would have to announce the station, I'd have to have, a little piece just the length. So I put on some Carl Maria Ditters von Dittersdorf, and I said in my announcement, the very famous classical composer and one of my favorites, Carl Maria Ditters von Dittersdorf. And I put it on, and I immediately got a phone call from this opera director because he liked my joke. But John and I, worked at the station for 2 years, and then the news director of the station loved John, just loved John, didn't like me so much, but loved John. So she wrote us a fabulous letter of recommendation. So when we moved to Seattle in '89, we started to work KUOW, and we were, by that point, weren't playing records anymore. 2 years later, you weren't playing records anymore. It was all CDs. And we were the night shift. We were 11 p.m. to like 6 a.m. Oof. And we worked overnight at KUOW. So we did a lot of radio, and it paid abysmally, but it paid something.
Well, as long as it helped keep the lights on, that's the important part. So we have gone through your career in radio, and I think this is probably a good time to transition into your voice acting career. You'd mentioned before that your husband was the key motivator to pushing you to finally make a demo tape. Before that, did you have any other idea or any other aspirations to join voice acting?
Well, I did a gig with a guy named Jim French in like 98. Mm-hmm. And Jim French was a local radio personality and had, radio shows. And he had a company called Imagination Theater, and he produced radio drama. Well, I had a gig with him for the Radio Enthusiasts of Puget Sound Convention. And I was asked to sing some Golden Age songs like Gershwin, Cole Porter, Irving Berlin. Mm-hmm. And Jim accompanied me. Well, I knew who Jim was, so I took one of John's demo cassette tapes. They were you had to get them on cassette tape to give to people. I took one of John's demo cassette tapes to the gig, and I gave it to Jim French, and I said, my husband is a voice actor, because John was John had an agent, and John was already doing computer games for Humongous and Sierra Online, etc. And I thought, well, radio drama, he's a shoo-in, and John's a wonderful actor. So Jim listened to this cassette tape and hired him, and then, hired me too. So even before I got a voice demo, Jim French was hiring us as actors for these radio dramas. and he had a series called The Further Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, and he had another series called Harry Nile, who is a gumshoe detective, and then, standalone radio dramas. And Jim wrote many of them, and other writers. And it's interesting that we worked with Jim for 20 years, and then he passed away in his late 80s. And John and his partner Larry Albert got permission from Jim's heirs and took over the company. And so they had to reincorporate, etc. And it's called Oral Vision, but they have the whole Jim French Imagination Theater library. And I'm on a lot. I'm on several hundred shows of the Sherlock Holmes stories and Harry Nile, and a bunch of others that I can't think of right now, but that's easy to find out. You just have to go to harrynile.com. Harry, the guy's name, Nile like the river.com, and there are hundreds of radio dramas that you can download and listen to, and I'm on a bunch of them. So I had done that work before John convinced me to get a voice demo.
All right.
Yeah, and it's not a joke. It's extensive. I've had a chance to comb through it here, and
Yes,
when Ellen and I first connected, earlier this year, I actually went there first because I saw a couple of your posts with it, and I just couldn't believe that was sitting there the whole time. Because I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes. I didn't even know these properties existed, and it was really cool that your producers were able to go out and grab not only the permission to have these properties, but just the sheer amount of them that are there. So it's really cool. If you haven't checked it out, we'll link it here in our show's description for folks to look at. But getting to what some folks have obviously come to know you for throughout the years, it's the character of GLaDOS in Portal, or GLaDOS, however you want to pronounce it phonetically. And one of the questions I always had for you here that I was thinking about was in some of the folks who've interviewed you before, we've mentioned this process of becoming, one with the character and trying to take on some of the emotions of that character, right? That transference effect. How is that possible for you with an AI character? How do you end up finding out who that AI non-human entity is and figuring out those emotions?
Well, it took a while, and I think for Portal, for the first one, I was really just trying to do what the writers and Eric Wolpaw and Jay Pinkerton were asking me to do, and sort of through Bill Van Buren, because Bill Van Buren mainly directed me. And so I was just trying to do what they asked me to do. But I feel like when we got into Portal 2, I really had made more decisions about the character. And I think poor GLaDOS is lonely. She's lonely. And I think she really likes the player, Chell, the avatar for the player. But I think GLaDOS really likes the player, and wants that interaction, even though sometimes the player gets killed. That I don't think that's not the motivation. The motivation is the testing and the interaction with the player, which is fun for GLaDOS. And GLaDOS is very lonely without the player. And it seemed very clear to me that after the first one, where the player kills GLaDOS and she's, sort of put on ice for a long time, that finally when the player turns up again, we're a lot alike, you and I. You tested me. I tested you. You killed me. Oh, wait a minute. I guess I haven't killed you yet. Well, food for thought, you monster. So I think GLaDOS is really hurt.
Yeah. I've always loved, and I'm not sure if you had as much fun saying this line where you said, I think you said we both said some things that you are going to regret.
That's right. I love that line. Yes.
No matter how many times I've heard that, I laugh every time.
Yeah.
Because it's like the ultimate married person line to say during an argument, right?
Well, I mean, that's why, my husband teases me, and he always likes to say that I'm perfect for GLaDOS because I'm passive aggressive. So,
I will say
we have our skills, we have our talents.
The passive aggressiveness, while it's absolutely throughout the entire Portal series, it is absolutely showcased on the poker night game because
that was fun.
I've never
they had to teach me how to play poker. Because I didn't know what any of that meant.
Yeah.
That whole poker night thing. I mean, it was very funny because Claptrap and I had something going on, which I thought was great fun. David, the voice actor. But those fellows who I recorded that with, they flew me down to San Francisco to make the recordings. They had to teach me about the game. I don't play poker.
But, I mean, it could have fooled me because, I played that game for many, many hours. And I just, when you say passive aggressive, it's like, you captured GLaDOS perfectly from the main series. There's something about being prodded while you're playing poker like that, and you're getting just small insults. They're always well delivered, and when you're playing it for hours upon hours, like I'm sitting there, I lose a hand, and I'm like, yep, this one stings a little bit more than it probably would have, because you've always got something great to say after a loss. And so I played a lot of organized sports, and so for me, trash talk isn't all that crazy, but it's when someone is able to get under your skin in the worst possible way. GLaDOS is perfect for that, especially in poker night. And
Thank you.
I loved that. I loved it. It was great, but it was also at times frustrating, and I loved every minute of it. So
just don't play poker with me, Ellen, because I don't understand the game.
Well, that's something I always kind of thought about, though. Since it's an AI character, right? Is it really so much being sadistic, or is it really the AI serving out programming at that point, right? Like,
GLaDOS isn't sadistic. No. She's programmed to test. She's for science. She's programmed to figure things out, and she reads reports, and it says here that you're a horrible person. Something about, I'm not just saying that. It's here in black and white. You are a horrible person or a terrible person. I can't remember which one it is, but both. You're horrible and terrible.
And you also say, I didn't even know we tested for that.
That's right.
Well, this is another good segue, though, because part of me knows, or at least in some of the performances I've done, Joe's done some performing arts himself. There's always a little bit of you in the character, right? It's hard to
of
parse
course.
that out.
Well, yeah. I think to be an honest actor, I believe one must use parts of oneself. I think so.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're just putting on a costume.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
So, how
Which
much then, if like you said, part of one's self-esteem there, how much of you do you think is in GLaDOS at this point? How much of that character do you think is as successful as it was because you played her?
Well, I don't know about that, but the things about GLaDOS, I identify with her loneliness. And I think
Hmm.
anybody who's been on the planet has experienced loneliness. And I identify with her loneliness, and that makes me empathize with her. And she's judgmental. She is judgmental and says things like, well, you should be able to do this. Well, you probably can't do this. But if you follow my direction, killing, this is the line I love: killing you and giving you good advice aren't mutually exclusive.
well, on the topic of working remotely, and you mentioned earlier how the way that you teach folks with music has changed in singing, but so has the world of entertainment, because you had a chance to participate in the Twitch driven adaptation of Night Mother, which I gotta say, I'm actually kind of astounded that more folks haven't tried to adapt like award-winning properties into these Twitch performances, because you see them all the time when it comes to playing like board games and video games, right? But seeing a production like Night Mother adapted into this Twitch format was really kind of stunning in
Well,
in
that
many
was
ways.
all Sheila Houlihan. That was
Mhm.
all Sheila.
Hmm.
And Sheila is young. And when the pandemic started, she had been down in LA and she moved back to Seattle because nothing was happening in LA. So, as she said, why have an apartment in LA when nothing's going on? So she wrote me and she said, let's just work on something. And so I looked at, two women's scripts, and I thought the one that worked the best for us to work on was Night Mother. And so we started working on it on Zoom and work on the play together, just reading the parts, the mother and the daughter. And sometime while we were doing this, Sheila said, we should do this on Twitch. And I said, well, how would we do that? Well, she worked it all out.
Yeah,
Sheila did it.
yeah,
So that we have Sheila to thank for that.
yeah,
Sheila,
Hmm.
besides being a wonderful actor, Sheila is a producer too, and she, contacted all the people she needed to contact, and got us a director of photography, Trevor, and then got my husband John to direct us. John's a wonderful director, and she got it all set up, and it was in September, just this September last, that we did it live.
yeah,
Live. I've never been so nervous. And I'm someone who performs live all the time.
Yeah.
But because of performing live with all of this technology, I was on our laptop here, just, in that room. And Sheila was in Bellevue, which is across the lake. And we did it live. So
yeah.
I never would have done that without Sheila. I mean, I my
Mhm.
motto is say yes to life. So I've said yes to a lot of things that I have no idea what I'm saying yes to, but it's like, well, if somebody wants me to do something, I'll say yes.
Yeah. I
But
think you, yeah.
Sheila made that
Mhm.
happen.
As much as Sheila made it happen, I mean, you still took home some hardware for your performance as best actor in a drama from 48 Film. The Webby Awards kind of speak for themselves, that the production was incredible. And
Well, I know how to
yeah.
act, but somebody else has to do all the technical stuff for me.
I just, when I watched it, because I didn't get to watch it live, of course, I wish I could have, but when I got to watch it later on in the video on demand side of it, I can't imagine how tense it must have been to be in your position, recording it live, let alone me watching it and feeling that tension because of the plot, not because of the technology. And so it's a really stunning way to bring the medium to a different place, and to see it done in Twitch, I think, was really a technical marvel, because it just hasn't been done yet, or at least it hasn't been done a whole lot.
Sheila Houlihan.
You've heard it here first. Give Sheila the credit. But we want folks to watch it, because I think it was a really, really well done production. And
well, we're very proud of it. We are very proud of it, and it's just about an hour long, and but it can be triggering because it is about suicide. So people need to be aware of that.
Yes. And they do a good job too of mentioning some of those things beforehand, and not to give too much away here, because we want folks to go watch this, of course. But I just wanted to give you credit for how something as simple as gripping the bag of like your nail polish and all of that. The way you did that sent chills. It just did. Seeing that in the moment, because I obviously didn't know it was coming, right? I'd never seen Night Mother or any of the adaptations before that. So just seeing how you react throughout that process is stunning. So I can't wait for other folks to see that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. And tell you what, Ellen, we've reached that point where we can officially say that you have survived a digital dissection. You've been a wonderful guest. We've enjoyed getting to have this journey with you. And in the tradition, we like to offer the floor to our guests to kind of talk about what's going on in their lives and anything that they would like to shed some light on.
Well, John and I are going to, so we were at NairCon a week ago. We're also going to be at a con in South Bend, Indiana, the last weekend in August, called, it's spelled PWR up, but I think it's pronounced Power Up, but it's Pour Up. But we're going to be at Power Up in South Bend, Indiana, the last weekend in August. And then over Labor Day weekend, we are going to be guests at PAX West, which is here in Seattle, which is very convenient for us. But we're also going to be with two other actors from the Team Fortress 2 game. So, of course, John is the sniper. I'm the administrator. Robin Atkins Downs is the medic. And Gary Schwartz is the heavy and another character. And so there's going to be a lot of panels about Team Fortress 2. And so at PAX West. So we've got those cons coming up, and we love going to cons. John and I always have so much fun because we're a couple of old fogies, and we get to talk to a lot of nice young people.
I mean, I think it's for good reason. When we've talked about this before with some of our guests about these experiences, video games have shifted a lot since we were kids, from just trying to find the princess in the next castle to fully realized cinematic and thematic experiences. And so games like Portal have really helped people find themselves in a lot of ways, but have also mesmerized us just from a storytelling standpoint. And so that's what the thing that we always like to thank our creators for and our guests is that you haven't just done a job, you've really mesmerized us and lifted us off our feet in a lot of ways. And so when it comes to Portal, obviously we thank you for Portal and GLaDOS, but we thank you just overall for everything you do. So we really do appreciate you sharing your talents with us, Ellen. We really do.
Well, you're welcome.
All right,
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you. I'm honored that you wanted to speak with me, Mark and Joe. And until next time, keep on dissecting.